So, Dan, when I saw John Leonard at one of the Dallas Cup games, he was bragging about his soccer game.
What was he bragging about?
Just that I got the sense he was feeling like, he's a bit of a baller in the making.
Spaz.
Did you call him a spaz?
No, but I feel this is going to be the cold start.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another edition of Third Degree, the podcast, number 16. Hi, I'm Peter, and today there are three of us. Dan Crook has rejoined the pod. Rejoice, world. All things are right once again. Come in, Dan.
Yes. Rejoice indeed. Thank you, Peter. I'm calling in from Kenilworth Road, where I'm currently hand-delivering the invite to Luton Town's Academy for the 2020 Dallas Cup.
Now, am I correct in saying Luton has locked in their promotion to the championship? Is that correct?
Not exactly, but I think we're 5 points clear with 4 games left, so all but.
And are you wearing your Luton Town nightshirt every night and snuggled up with your Luton Town mascot stuffed animal?
No, because I'm an adult.
Why would that stop you?
Same reason I don't get players' names on the back of jerseys.
All right. So Saturday morning, you'll be all cuddled up with your ESPN Plus watching the battle against Accrington Stanley?
Did you say African Stanley?
No, I said Accrington Stanley.
African Stanley is probably a better footballer than Accrington Stanley, to be fair.
It would, and it would make for an awesome song to sing in the stands, wouldn't it?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Yeah,
but
that.
Please, give us some inspiration.
Yeah, and you'd probably get charged with racism, too.
Actually, last time we played Accrington... No, it was Morecambe, never mind. There was a false racism charge at some point.
I need to go to a Luton Town game, but I only want to go with Dan. So we need to coordinate that to make that happen somehow, some way, my friend.
Okay. I'll try and time it with Bob's soccer trip, too.
Yeah, I'm never getting invited on that. Okay, and of course, joining us to round out the the trio is none other than our fearless leader, the founder of thirddegree.net and from the Dallas Morning News, Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Hello, Peter. Actually, for real this time, calling in from the host hotel for the Dallas Cup up here in Addison. So,
man, you've
been on the road.
You've been busting your balls all week, covering Dallas Cup and all things related to that. And you've been doing you've been doing the Lord's work, Buzz. So, thank you.
You're welcome, and I hope everyone has a chance to read some of it, and hope everyone has a chance to take in some of these games. It really is a fantastic level of play. The semifinals tomorrow, of the Super Group is going to be fantastic. Yeah, we
had a good time sitting there watching. We watched, the second half of Liverpool, NYCFC, and I think I stayed for the first half of Dallas and, the Mexican team. I can't remember what the name of it was.
Querétaro.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, that was the first time in quite a long while I had seen a FC Dallas U19 Academy team look second best.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about this. The current downside, if you will, in some ways it's a downside of the youth revolution, if you want to call it that play the kids, is that there's a trickle-up effect. And so any given FC Dallas team in the academy has now lost 2, 3, 4 of their best players up a level or two, and you're filling in from underneath. So they're not quite as winning as they used to, but in terms of progression of young talent, it's actually pretty exciting that some of the young guys are playing up, and they're going to learn a lot from these games, even if they may not bring home quite as many trophies as they did in the past.
Well, Buzz is correct. If you have any soul, you will go attend, and even the free ones, some Dallas Cup games, no matter who you go watch. It's too good to pass up and miss out in our community. So that runs through Sunday. All right. Now, normally we would start the podcast by reviewing the previous FC Dallas game, which is a odd victory over Portland last Saturday, but we're going to pause on that because in the hours prior to us recording this podcast, MLS did the most unbelievable hold my beer I think they could possibly pull off on Twitter, which is not only announcing that they are going to expand to 30 teams, they followed that up by revealing that they now are going to participate in the youth payment structure for the first time ever, which is a 1-2 punch of pretty high proportions for anybody who's nerdy enough to care about such things for MLS. So, guys, let's start off with the news about solidarity and training payments. MLS is getting into it. This is quite a big deal for a lot of people involved, but there's still a lot of questions left to be answered.
Yeah, more than a lot of questions. They already have answered a lot of questions, and there still are even more questions because almost any given player in any given scenario might have slight differences and are going to be slightly different landscape. Now, the one really truly fascinating thing for me about this is just Major League Soccer saying this. USSF still is a neutral, we have no opinion. So it's 100% on MLS to enforce this themselves and to make their deals with other teams around the world work this way. So it's going to be interesting to see how successful the league is in that regard and how other teams, not MLS clubs in the United States, are going to react to all this. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it does. One does get the sense that the Federation, which is paid dues and fees by the thousands of youth clubs around the country, have left them out in the weeds to fend for themselves, which I kind of understand and at the same time think is a bit of a suspect on their part. There's a lot of problems that come with trying to be the enforcer for all of those clubs, the potential lawsuits and all of that. But it is at least a progressive move forward for the majority of clubs in this country that are likely to move players on to other countries.
Yeah, it seems like it is to me. I think that it's a positive move. You know, the situations that you don't want to have happen from a club perspective is you don't want to have your Weston McKennies happen where a guy walks away for nothing. Now, there's still some questions there regarding, you know, if we're talking about a player who is completely free like this, can he still just walk away like that? I don't know enough about the deep details of how this process works to know if that's going to solve the Weston McKennie problem. They did specifically mention him in the articles where if he moves again from Germany to somewhere else, that FC Dallas specifically will get a share of whatever his fee is.
For the solidarity payment.
Yeah, there is no go back to now his first deal when he went to Germany in the first place, but they did specifically say that if he moves again to another country, that Dallas would be involved and MLS wouldn't. So again, every situation is going to be different, and we'll have to see how it all plays out. But you know, if you're in a club that's in the selling business, this is going to help develop the club because the money is going to, you hope and you believe, go back into investment in the club and in the team and in the facilities and all that kind of stuff.
I think that there's a problem in that. You know, the solidarity payments are supposed to come out of 5% of a transfer fee. If a player like Weston McKennie doesn't sign a contract and walks away, well, 5% of nothing is nothing.
Right.
When you say doesn't sign, are you saying doesn't sign a new contract after Schalke?
No, like Weston McKennie never signed a professional contract with FC Dallas.
Oh, yes.
So
but
there was no transfer fee in the initial case. He still would have walked away and FC Dallas would have got nothing.
Yeah, that's true.
But under the new set of participation that MLS announced today, in that scenario, they would get some sort of compensation for training worked out that they could go to the DRC and make a claim to get paid something back from Schalke.
Yeah, that's my understanding, and I think that that's what they were directly quoted as saying about McKennie specifically.
Right.
You know, the thing that Dan's right. The thing it won't solve is the unsigned player who just wants to walk away and sign on his own as a free agent. You know, you're still gonna lose out on that entire transfer fee. You'll just get the solidarity part, which is better than nothing. It's better than losing him for completely zero. So at least you're gonna get something. But like I said, it's a giant murky mess still.
One thing with the DRC is Crossfire Premier have been waiting for a result for 4 years now on
Yedlin.
On Yedlin, yeah.
Yeah.
it's expected to come out soon, but you think about like youth clubs, specifically outside of MLS, if and when it does come into effect for them too, well, youth clubs go bust in that time. There's not going to be someone to claim the money at the end of it.
Yeah, there's the difference. To my understanding, the difference between Yedlin and the Bradley and Dempsey issues is that Yedlin's player passport has the proper documentation showing that he played for Crossfire. If you look at Dempsey's and Bradley's, you'd never know they ever played youth soccer, as it was stated to me by someone. And the analogy that I kind of make, which is not going to be fun for a lot of people, is we also didn't know it was bad for you to smoke back in the 50s. So in 2019, everybody knows you need to start documenting your players' playing situation and keeping up with it, so that if for whatever reason they turn out to be a professional soccer player, you have all the notes and documentation and I's dotted and T's crossed that maybe back 15 years ago people just didn't think ever would be a big deal.
Yeah, you're getting into a level of understanding of how the mechanics of it work that is beyond, I think, any of us who've never, at least myself, who's never worked for a club. I know the basic principles of how it's supposed to work and how you're supposed to document things like that. But the hard part, and this is where USSF is washing their hands, is they're not going to help anybody with this stuff. Like, you're 100% on your own if you want to try and get this stuff. And MLS is going to be on its own if you want to try and get this stuff. There's no organization helping out and monitoring and policing all this thing. It's the Wild West in terms of getting your money. And
that is obviously the big complaint, is that, all the clubs that are not MLS clubs don't have the power in the legal army that, I'm assuming that it backs up Major League Soccer's ability to fight these particular claims. Dallas Texans or Crossfire or Polisic's club. I can't think of it off the top of my head now. Those clubs
PA
don't
Classics.
have PA Classics. Thank you. Don't have the the financial power to do that work themselves. So it will be fascinating to watch. I know a lot of people are still upset about even what was announced today, but it does seem at least some sort of progress was made on that. And then the other big news of the day, which was the news preceding that, was I don't know if this is stunning or not, but Major League Soccer announced that they have decided they're going to go from 28 to 30 teams. And they hope to have announced and chosen those two expansion cities by the All-Star game this year. And it's going to cost whoever wins $200 million.
Yeah, and they even went further to say that they're accelerating the process with Sacramento and St. Louis. So it's pretty clear that those two teams are going to be Sacramento and St. Louis. That they all but announced the next two teams in a lot of ways. So those are the two teams that also in the last several weeks have released new stadium renderings of what their MLS stadiums are going to look like. So it seems like it's a pretty well along the path. And I'm okay with both those franchises. They're ones I would pick if I was in charge. I like the idea of 30 teams. I actually think that eventually they'll go past 30 teams. So, it's getting to be the size of other pro leagues. The 30 to 32 window is where most everybody is in the United States.
So there is one mystery spot still up, because we've got 24 currently, Miami, Nashville in 2020, Austin in 2021, and then presumably Sacramento and St. Louis, which would leave us at 29.
Yeah, who the 30th team will be an interesting question, and you get into almost in a lot of ways sort of a bidding war or a who can one up each other kind of award for that last spot, of which there are anywhere from 2 to 7 different teams depending on which list you look at that are trying to get that spot. So that's why I think in the end they'll go past 30, but the fight for 30 will be fun to watch if you're into that kind of business side interests of MLS.
Makes you wonder if San Antonio has any shot whatsoever at being that 30th team.
I think Austin killed their chances. That's just my take. I mean, no one's told me that, but if you're looking at a national footprint of a gigantic country, those teams are awfully close together.
Well, Sacramento and San Jose are awfully close to each other too.
They are, but California is a bigger place, more people. It's not.
I mean, versus Texas, not really. No.
Well, in terms of it's a more of a favored market.
I don't know.
let's be honest, if MLS could, they'd stack the league with California and New York only.
Well, I think
Yeah,
that's
I just don't.
cynical.
I just don't think that. I just don't. I think San Antonio. Once Austin happened, I think San Antonio's out. As much as I would have preferred San Antonio. I think it's a better market than Austin. But
It's a proven organization, great ownership, stadium to actually start with.
Yeah, I wonder. So, does anybody have a bet on what you think that 30th team is?
I think the teams that look like they're in the driver's seat are probably Phoenix. And maybe Detroit, because the owner in Detroit that MLS is talking to, which is not Detroit City, has a lot of money. And then Phoenix seems like a big market, and an pretty established franchise there. And that Phoenix Rising.
That ownership group as well is fantastic.
Yeah. If I had a vote, I would vote for Tampa Bay to get in as a really big. That's a top 10 market that doesn't have a team. I know Orlando's pretty close, but Orlando and Tampa are separate markets, and they're both. And Tampa's a top 10 market, so that might be kind of where I might look. But those are probably the Phoenix and Detroit. I think are probably the ones that I think are most on the general radar at this point.
I was hoping somebody would say Bug Eaters FC because that's the most awesome name in the land.
Bug Eaters is awesome. It's a great brand and a great franchise, but I don't think that's an MLS target market.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not.
No.
Okay, now we haven't said this, but we are in a celebratory mood because this is a winners podcast. FC Dallas hosting Portland last week, although I think we would all agree that wasn't the sweet taste of victory. That one went down with a bit of a bitter taste because that was a weird 90 minutes for this club and how that victory came about.
Well, ourselves and Luchi all talked about what a good team Portland is, even though they're not getting the results. It's still the same team that went to the final last year. They just happen to have a little bit of defensive breakdowns right now, which you saw against Dallas, and they're happen to be struggling because they have so many road games. But when they put Valeri in, and when they put Blanco in there, and those guys decided they wanted to try and take the game over, man, it was pretty hard to keep them off the scoreboard.
Dan, we haven't had your thoughts on some of the stuff that's happened over the last few weeks. Any particular point of view you might have in terms of what we're seeing from Luchi in what he's done in terms of starting lineups and substitutions and the timing and such?
I mean, he's learning. There's a learning curve. He's got to learn to close out games properly. I think we saw an element of a team that panicked at the weekend. I mean, there was a funny exchange. I wasn't in the press conference. I stayed upstairs to cover the North Texas game, but I was told someone asked how come in the previous game to try and close out in Philadelphia, he'd put on Andrasek instead of bringing on, say, a defensive midfielder, and his reaction was to kind of laugh about it and say, "Are you saying I messed up?" Yeah, I guess I did. It's a learning curve.
Do either of you have any thoughts on what it is about the players or the tactics or whatever you may think it is that's causing them to suddenly become have to like panic defend and really start getting overrun in the last 30 minutes of the game? Because it's a lot of what we saw in the game in Philadelphia was a repeat of itself in the game at home against Portland.
Well, one of the players mentioned in an article this week, I can't remember where I saw it, so I can't cite it for you, but mentioned that the way that they're playing this 4-3-3 possession and the high press wears them out. And so they tend to get tired over the last stretch of the game. I think that's probably particularly true with the three midfielders. That's where you see the biggest attrition. And as those guys tire and you have to replace them, that's something when you start to see the drop-off. Cirillo, for being an 18-year-old rookie, has done a phenomenal job, holding possession, holding the middle together in the absence of Brian Acosta. And when they brought Jacori Hayes in for him in the 78th minute against Portland, I think that's where you started to see some of the fall off in terms of possession and holding it together and holding the ball and keeping it away from Portland. it's going to be interesting to watch this team as the games heat up and see if that aspect gets worse. See if they start to tire or continue to tire late in games and struggle late in games.
You almost kind of want to bring, like a Peter Lucene type off the bench, someone who may not be as quick as the starters, but an older head that just knows how to shut things down, slow down the play, dictate the pace, and kind of keep possession.
But that's the singular difference between 2019 FC Dallas and all the Oscar Pereira clubs, because Oscar, I'm assuming this was Oscar's decision, every year they always seem to either have or bring in a new older, kind of elder statesman that could run around in the midfield slowly, but at least do something in trying to help retain possession. And man, it just feels like they don't have that at this moment. And maybe
there's no question.
And maybe this is really the highlight of them missing Brian Acosta the last few weeks.
Yeah, certainly getting Acosta back will help, but I think there's no question that they're missing that kind of presence. But unfortunately, this is the nature of going with a young team, is you're not going to have the veteran presence off the bench that's available. So, when you have a young team like this, you're going to have to learn how to kill off games. This is an important part of their progress, an important part of what will advance them as a team over the rest of this season, or maybe even part of next season. And that's a contributing factor in why you and I and everybody else thought this is not a top of the West team this year. This is a middle of the West team. As they learn and progress and learn how to kill off games and learn how to be pros, they'll get better. But right now, they for sure are lacking that, as you say, a player that Oscar would always go get, that veteran guy off the bench that can, just like Peter Lucene, that you can, he's not going to start any games, but he's there to help kill them off. They don't have that guy for sure.
I mean, most of them are so forgettable. I can't even think of the guy they brought in last season, the old Mexico player. Who was that? The midfielder.
Oh man, I can't believe you just asked me that.
You know who I'm talking about, right?
I
mean
do.
Abel Aguilar.
Yes.
Yeah, Aguilar. Thank you. God, it was
Abel Aguilar. Thank you. I would have never conjured up that name, but that actually just reinforces my point. Now, Dan, I'm going to ask you a question, because I got to see the team for the first time in person all season, and as I was sitting there watching, one of the very clear questions about, why wasn't Badji scoring? Why don't we think we're seeing Jesse get more opportunities? Became more and more clear to me when I could watch the team in kind of a full field environment, which is this team just isn't really very good at getting the ball to their number 9. And I'm interested if you have an opinion as to why that is.
I mean, isn't that the $64 million question?
Yeah, but you're British, and I assume you know everything, and so you
Fine,
probably
the
figured it
£64
out.
million question.
Yeah.
It's that killer ball. It was there all through preseason. First game, it's not there. Jesus is doing a far better job of dropping back and trying to pick up possession. Maybe it's just part and parcel of the nature of having the free 8 as opposed to the strict 10 that kind of dictates the play, particularly in those first few games when, Luchi would say Mosquera was the primary playmaker from a kind of awkward position to be the primary playmaker, and particularly with a player like Mosquera who is hot and cold or nothing in between. Unfortunately, I don't really have the answer for you there.
That's disappointing. We pay you a lot of money for this.
Yeah, but and when that check eventually comes, I'll answer it.
Without Acosta, right, you're left with Grezzo, who's a holder. You got Cirillo, who's a holder. You got Arangis, who we've notably talked about in the final third. He's not connecting with people. You got Mosquera, who's a little out of sorts, and he's more of a slasher with the ball at his own feet anyway. And you've got Paxton, who's also a guy that runs at people. You just don't have in your front 6 a guy that's a nifty passer and setter-upper of goals. You don't have a Mauro Diaz. You don't have a playmaking an Oscar Pereira in the first 5 or 6 years of his career. There's nobody that's that kind of player.
The best bet there really is going to be Barrios, since he's learning to get to transition away from getting to the byline and trying to cross in to cutting inside and laying off or taking the shot himself.
Yeah, his game is a drive and cross too. So none of those guys are like the kind of guy that makes a nice little tidy leading pass right into the gap of the striker's feet. So it's just they just don't have that kind of player in their setup.
The other thing that struck me when kickoff started was the visual and kind of coming back to something I think we talked about several podcasts ago, which is I don't think we have taken the time to acknowledge the fact that, a year ago, the club brought in this young whippersnapper of a Chilean that was supposed to be the next Mauro Diaz, and several months later, we're 6 games into a new season, and playing the role that guy was supposed to play is a kid out of the club's own academy in Paxton, and stuck out on the left is Pablo Aranguiz, and it doesn't take you very long of watching him in real time to understand just how much better Pax is at playing soccer than Pablo is.
He is right now. It helps, of course, that Paxton has been with Luchi for a long time and knows Luchi's system, and is in a position now where his coach has ultimate faith in him, whereas Pablo is not Luchi's guy. Luchi didn't bring him here. He doesn't know Luchi's system and doesn't know the league. So it's entirely possible that a couple of years from now we'll think we're crazy for having this conversation. But right this minute, there's no question that Paxton is the MVP of this team in a lot of. Let's give Carlos Grezza some love, but Paxton Pomacco, at least in the offensive sense, is by far the MVP of this team right now. He's playing above everybody else, and it's no question that he's the most dynamic that they have going.
Okay, then somebody, either one of you, tell me or debate me over this fact. If you watch the starting 11 for FC Dallas last week, argue with me that the players on the field that come out of the Dallas, out of the academy, aren't clearly harder, bigger effort players than any of the other guys that are not from the academy, maybe minus Grezzo. Am I explaining that right? I see what
you're saying, but I think that's a little bit unfair to Marco Barrios. But that guy gives 100% effort.
Okay, no, that's a good one. Yep, Barrios always gives 120%. He's my junkyard dog. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, the kind of players that Dallas has signed out of their academy, they talk just as much about their character and the kind of worker they are as they do their talent level. I mean, that's a part of it. And so there's no question that the players they're producing are better fighters and better workers and have that intensity fight for their club.
Yeah, I'm being hyperbolic. I'm being dramatic for a reason, but in particular, while Aranguiz has done better at doing some of the dirty work and coming back and doing some defending, he's not very good at it. But I was particularly put off by Mosquera's performance. Like when they were really struggling to retain possession, he did some things defensively that were just hard to watch. There was a moment late in the game where a Portland player won a ball and started to dribble into Dallas's half of the field, and Mosquera just ran straight at him. And I have no idea what Mosquera thought he was going to do, and the Portland player literally just made the easiest skill move to get right around him, and Mosquera just kept running right past him. And it's that kind of thing that really separates some of the qualities that I think we see out of kids coming from the academy, that sometimes I just don't think we all take a moment to really appreciate how good those guys really are.
And they've been brought up in the system.
Well, but is that a system thing? I mean, I don't think that's necessarily learning the system, Dan. I think that's just like soccer 101 stuff, isn't it? Like growing up and being a professional player and trying hard and knowing how to defend properly too, right?
In some clubs it's a case of you have a very specific role and that's what you do, nothing else. FC Dallas, it's every player plays at least 2 positions. Every player gets forward. Every player gets back. Every player, they defend as a team. They attack as a team. It's kind of it can be a strange culture to come into. And particularly with the young guys, they've been at the club for years. They've grown up in it. That's what they've known. They've idolized the players. And they're kind of willing to run through walls to earn that paycheck and to be one of those players.
I'm having trouble putting my finger on specifically what's going on with Mosquera because in the spring, through all the scrimmages they had through training, I mean, I thought he was clearly FC Dallas's best player coming out of into the start of the season. He was doing things on the field. He was working hard. He was playing about as complete a game as I've ever seen him play. He was tearing people apart, going at them, tearing defenses apart. And then we got into the season, and that sort of faded. Whether maybe he got a little banged up, he always have that little hammy problem. He got sick. It's just not going right. He's getting a little frustrated. He is a little bit of a, I'm not going to say fragile psyche, but he's a little bit of an up and down personality where he kind of has these great rises and these great depressions over the course of a season. So it's hard for me to put my finger on what the deal is with him because he looked so good, through March and into the season. And now it's just, you wonder like, oof. I will say in his defense that last week, when I saw him in training, I thought he looked fantastic, about as good as I'd seen him all season. He even scored a goal from midfield, and then he didn't get picked. So I don't know whether that was just a question of he's coming back from an illness, and so we're not going to start him, or whether there was some other factor going on. But he is a very hot and cold kind of player, and he's definitely in a cold window right now for sure.
Yeah, he was super frustrating in that game, and was in no way, shape, or form helping correct the problem of possession retention, which does lead me to a question for you guys. And Dan, I'll let you go first. What do you think Luchi can do differently, especially, and we'll get into the game with Atlanta here in a second, but what do you think he can be doing differently to help his team in the last 30 minutes of the game?
Learning in terms of his subs, especially in terms of timing. He's just got to ensure that the most suitable 11 are out there at that specific time. And if they're trying to close out a game, maybe that means Brandon Savania instead of a Zdenek Ondrasek or Mascara. And really, not burn a sub at the start of the game, essentially. And he put Thomas Roberts out on the wing, probably not the greatest decision. Maybe it was a toss-up between he and Nima Tomasi, with Tomasi only just coming back from injury.
For the Philadelphia game, yeah.
Yeah, for the Philadelphia game. But then you kind of got that, well, if it doesn't work, we've got a substitution burnt, which later in the game can't necessarily make a defensive substitution.
Buzz, I'm sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
No.
Buzz, do you think there's anything to the idea that maybe Luchi gets a little stubborn in how he's been implementing Grayzo? Grayzo seems to be playing much further up the field, and he's allowing Cerrillo to be kind of that singular holding midfielder, and it seems like he almost waits a little too long before he decides to go ahead and pull Carlos further back and to help cover the back four. Well,
I think he wants to play a single pivot, and have one guy anchor that position. Why he doesn't just have Grezzo continue to do that and use Cirillo as a linker, more of an 8 kind of thing, because he can play that. Evan can play that. We've seen him do it. So it's an interesting question as to why he does it that way. Because, the way Grezzo plays, you end up with more of a double 6 almost kind of thing, heading back towards Perea territory. I would imagine that it has something to do with not asking Cirillo to carry the weight of holding the two ends of the field together. That maybe Grezzo's better at that. I don't know. That may be a bit of a reach trying to figure out why he's doing that. I mean, listen, when you get Brian Acosta back, it's going to solve a lot of these problems. You're going to get Cirillo's going to go back to the bench, and all of a sudden maybe you don't have to rely on a Roberts or a Ja'Cory Hayes late in the game. You'll have Cirillo come in late in the game. The one thing I would suggest as a possibility of subbing is don't forget that Ryan Hollingshead can play wing. And Ryan Hollingshead can play in the front 6 somewhere. And, if you're looking for a veteran experience to try and maybe hold the thing together a little bit, you can go to a Pedroso for somebody and slide Hollingshead up. And that can be sort of a veteran influence in some ways. So Luchi has some options. And we've talked about this too, Peter, many times, is that you knew there were going to be some growing pains with Luchi too. he's going to have to figure out some of these things himself, how to sub, how to get his team to hold the game. So
yeah,
this all feeds back into why we thought it was going to be a little bit of a struggle at the beginning of the season. And so we're seeing a little bit of those struggles.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most fascinating storylines about this club, and what makes it really interesting is that it's the entirety of the growth that you have to watch from the coaching all the way to the players. I find it really fascinating. Let's spend a couple of minutes talking about the last few minutes of the game, and we can drag everybody down with a small VAR discussion. I think my biggest frustration out of that whole deal was it just reminded me once again of just what a crappy implementation of VAR is within Major League Soccer, simply in terms of communicating to people in a stadium or in a press box, for that matter, what in the world is going on, because that was the perfect storm of things happening where you could tell there was very, very few people, you could probably count them on one hand, that had any clue what was happening, in particular with the Hollingshead incident.
Yeah, wasn't it like another 45 seconds of play had gone by and they had to go all the way back and look at it?
I think it was almost a full minute after the incident. He waited.
It was crazy.
And the part that I don't know is, did the VAR official see it, tell the referee, and the referee decided to wait till the ball went out of play to go back?
He has to wait until it goes out of play.
Okay, so maybe that's the reason for that, for that length of time. But, man, how do you guys feel about it? I mean, I'm sure everybody's feeling relieved, but if we're all taking off our hoop-colored glasses, do we think he made the right decision? I'll start with you, Buzz. I'll start with you, Dan.
Well, I may or may not have spoiled it earlier, but the Professional Referees Organization released a video earlier today that their manager of senior assistant referees and video review operators, that is a terrible job title, Greg Barkey, supposedly came out and said that in Pro's official view that should have been a handball. Certainly, the broadcast views all made it look like it was handball. There was a view that an FC Dallas fan, Tommy, posted on Twitter that was kind of like, made it seem like, okay, it was going towards his body. It wasn't, the arm may have been in an unnatural position, but it was going to hit him in the shoulder, kind of, or close to the ribs, and he was moving his hand away, close contact or that deal. We'll say as well, it was really weird in the press box. Obviously, we kind of knew, because, we'd all obviously seen the handball and watched Barrios and Paxton take up the other end and then it come back, and logically, that was the only thing that could have been reviewable. But it would be really nice if VAR was done in line with everywhere else, or every other sport, where it's play the telling view on the video screens and kind of let people understand, and maybe even keep audio of the conversations.
Buzz, did you think the right call was made?
I would have called Hollingshead for a handball. For me, that arm is in too weird of a unnatural position. That's not, to me, something I would have let pass. As a former crap referee, I definitely would have called that one, and I would have not have called the one on Paxton. I thought that was not a PK. I thought that guy just...
Yeah, we haven't even...
That was just sort of a brush, and Paxton was fine. But Hollingshead I would have called. I thought that was a handball.
Yeah, the thing with Hollingshead, I thought, is, at the time I said, I said 100% penalty. And then in watching the referee review it from the same angle on the close-up on the TV, and, if you're reviewing a clip 20 times in slow motion, you're probably going to give the benefit of the doubt to the defender at that point.
Well, I would say if you're having to watch it 20 times, you're going to give the benefit of the doubt to yourself as the referee who made the initial call.
Yeah, he's not going to overrule himself. There wasn't anything about it that was like, oh man, I've screwed this up, I better recall it.
It's
probably
not
was
a clear and
exactly what he
obvious
saw
error
live.
if you have to go into that great a detail.
Well,
Yeah.
at the press conference, I think I asked him. I don't remember Luchi if he had seen the replay, and he said no. But what he had been told and how it was described to him was the reason why it was deemed not a handball is because the ball deflected onto Ryan's hand from somebody's head, meaning that the Portland player wasn't heading the ball as a shot on goal. It was more of a deflection off of his head, and that hit Ryan's arm. And the way the law is written is that's not deemed a foul, and you can kind of, I mean, that's a lot of parsing, right? And again, it gets back to the point where if you're going to ask somebody to review a decision they made on the fly, and they can sit there and watch it 20 times and not feel like it's an obvious error, they're always going to go with their initial call, which again makes the decision, the upcoming news that the EPL will allow VAR to make those decisions going forward, really fascinating. One of the things that I've learned from my English referee homestays that are here this week for the Dallas Cup is the argument behind doing it that way is not dissimilar to the effect of goal line technology, which is because it's a computer, nobody complains about it. Well, with a VAR official making decisions somewhere else, people won't complain about it as much. I laugh too about that idea. People are still going to bitch about it, but it's harder to argue with somebody that's not standing in front of you. If he looks at you and says, "Hey, look, it wasn't my decision; it was somebody else's in a box's decision," and that's an interesting thing that'll be fun to watch next year when the EPL institutes it that way.
My one statement about that is that over the history of soccer, one of the things that's been true about the referee in the center is that he's universally in charge. He's the king. Whatever he says goes. This is the first time I can think of where they're taking that responsibility, a higher authority away from him.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, but that's also a byproduct of technology, and we've seen a lot of the pros and cons of VAR in the last 7 days with the stuff that's happened in Champions League, and in some other places. It's here to stay, and
next thing you know, the stadium clock will be official.
Yeah, it's the new normal, as somebody once called it. Okay, so now it's an interesting trip to Atlanta. Dallas, as a club, is facing back-to-back the two previous MLS Cup opponents, who at the moment, at least up until this week, neither of which had won a game. So Dallas goes to Atlanta and has to play in the robot's anus, known as Mercedes-Benz Arena, and it is. I mean, it looks just like that, doesn't it?
Robo-rectum.
Hashtag Robo-rectum. I implore everybody listening to the pod to at least once on Twitter hashtag Robo-rectum for us, and we'll all know what you're talking about. But Atlanta did get their first win of the year with Frank de Boer as coach, and I don't know, Buzz, this seems like this is one of the really good tests of the season for this team.
Yeah, this feels like a game that's going to be a problem. This is the kind of team where you're going in against a team that's been struggling, and all of a sudden they kind of figure it out like the week before you play them. And that makes it really, really hard. The only gigantic takeaway I have from Atlanta is that I have no idea what their coach de Boer is doing, and Joseph Martino only has one goal on the year. So those are two crazy things to me. It looks like a Brian Acosta could be available. He traveled, so I don't know why they would have traveled him. Maybe it's a last minute physical test, hoping he'll play. So maybe he'll be back. Maybe that'll be a nice boost going into Atlanta in the recycled jersey game.
Oh, that's right. They're wearing those ugly. Oh my God. Okay.
At least they didn't get the toothpaste uniform. They get the black one, so that's fine.
That's the other hashtag, toothpaste.
Toothpaste. Yeah. So the three hashtags for this game are hashtag ATLFCD, hashtag Robo-rectum, and hashtag toothpaste.
Yeah.
Toothpaste.
Oddly enough, two of those are actually the names of Atlanta rappers.
They're the new hype men for Paperboy. All right.
Well, here's an interesting stat I was just looking at. On the season, fouls suffered. Atlanta only 44, Dallas 102.
Oh.
So all that possession is leading to a lot of people being kicked on this Dallas team. Paxton, I think, is second in the league in fouls suffered.
Yeah. Paxton's getting his 19-year-old ass kicked every once in a while. There were a couple of moments in that Portland game where he got it from Chara, and credit to Paxton, he certainly took his own pound of flesh. And I was quite pleased for him. I was whoever I was sitting watching the game with, I was commenting that every week I watch Paxton, he reveals yet another new quality and skill. And from the PDX and from the Portland game, it was his willingness to go get his own pound of flesh. So I was delighted by that when he got his yellow card for kicking the crap out of Chara.
He even acknowledged it after the game. Paxton did. He said, "I got mine."
Yeah, good for him.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Luchi's tactics face up against De Boer's, who's, I think I'm saying this correctly, somebody tell me I'm wrong, but isn't he running some sort of weird 3-4-3 formation, essentially?
Up until... he's played 3 different formations in the last 3 weeks. He had run 3-4-3 through the Champions League and start the season. They went away to Columbus. He played in a 4-3-3, and then the last week he went to a 4-2-3-1.
I just hope that we're going to get to see old friend Breck Shea try and mark Michael Barrios. That'll be.
Or play at left back and get sent off.
Yeah, it could be for an entertaining day.
How do you prepare for that? A team that's they're trying to figure out who their playmaker is without Almiron. And now suddenly they're playing a new formation every week. They've got a clueless coach, and it's now you're clueless as to what he's doing as well as he's clueless to what he's doing.
Well, they've got enough quality on the field that, at some point, and maybe this is what happened last week, formation and tactics be damned, sometimes just the quality shines through, and the fact I think they won that game at home, didn't they?
No, it was on the road. They've tied both games at home.
Ah, okay. So I think Buzz is right. This doesn't smell good going into it, but there is a lot of goofiness going on with Atlanta at this moment. Luchi's got the team well organized. My concern is that just because they're so inexperienced, they just aren't really good at closing out games once they've gotten a lead, whether they deserved it or not. And I think the best hope we all have is that Acosta's back and they can get some experience back in the center of the field.
Well, certainly Dallas as a collective is playing better, and they're certainly a well-organized team, and you like their youth and their energy. But Atlanta still has the difference makers. They still have Martinez, and they still have Barco, even though he's been coming off the bench. He's got 3 goals on the year, 2 last games. So they got guys that can, just like Portland did, they got guys that can elevate and rise above the game. And Dallas, so far, doesn't really have that except for maybe Paxton. So,
even the further back, they've got guys like the Renowitz and Parkhurst to kind of handle those younger attacking players.
Yeah, those 2 dudes are what Dallas is missing, at least in the Lorenovich and midfield part is for sure.
Yeah, one of the things that, and I know, Buzz, you haven't had an opportunity to watch practice this week because you've been out at Dallas Cup stuff all week, is, in my mind, if Badji is healthy, there's a part of me that would really like to see this team, because I'm not buying it with Pablo and or Mosquera, putting Badji back at the 9 and moving Jesse out wide on the left, and what we would see out of that. I think you said we saw some of that in the preseason. Am I onto anything there in terms of a concept or an idea?
Well, we saw a lot of that. I mean, that was because Badji was the go-to guy. We saw a lot of Jesus Ferreira as a winger. But we also, for one game this year, we've seen Jesus as the 9 and Badji as the left wing. And other than the point-blank shot that Badji made in that game that was incredibly brutal miss, he actually played a pretty good game in that game. So I wouldn't be stunned to see Badji play as a wing. When he was brought here by Pereira, one of the things Pereira said was, in the long run, Badji's probably a winger for us. So it's entirely possible that either one of those options are plausible if Badji is healthy, because you're right. Neither Mosquera nor Aranguiz has 100% sold us during the season as that left winger. I mean, preseason aside, where Mosquera had, but in the games he hasn't.
All right, boys. Dan, I'll start with you. Do you have a prediction for hashtag Roborectum?
Don't do predictions.
Oh, that's right. You don't do them, which is really weird. Buzz, you got one?
Yeah, I don't feel super good about this game, but I think they might get a 1-1 draw on the road.
Interesting. All right. Before we end the podcast, I want to discuss with you guys a comment that I heard made by Luchi Gonzalez, coach of FC Dallas, for those who are joining in late, really late. I think it was yesterday. They've been doing, they've been streaming a lot of the GA Cup games on Twitch. And Bobby Warshaw's in town, and he's been doing a series of these kind of like live panel discussions or one-on-one discussions. And they did one with Luchi Gonzalez, and I just happened to pop in on it very, very late. And somebody from the audience asked Luchi about scouting and some of his thoughts about scouting. And I'm paraphrasing here. I'm not directly quoting him, but essentially towards kind of as a side comment, Luchi said something along the lines of, hey, I want the best talent from all of my other teams, from all the other teams in my area, and I don't want to be satisfied or be willing to just say, no, they'll never come play for us. And I thought that was, one, a really refreshingly honest admittance publicly to say that, but I also find it to be oddly in conflict with the fact that the company and brand that he works for is also trying to sell a consumer-facing product at the same time, because that does feel like you are poisoning the waters that you're also fishing in for selling season tickets, because you're openly saying, hey, we want to take all of the best players from the other club teams in town. And I'm just wondering if you guys feel like, is that just the realities of the situation, or is that really more of indicative of maybe a lot of the problems that this club has with kind of what, with kind of the fractured relationship that it has with the local club soccer community?
Well, I think there's no question that they've fractured some of their local relationships. On one level, I agree with them. It's like, I feel like there should be nobody that you can't get from your backyard. That's the way it should be. It's, everyone in this town should feed the one Division I pro team. Now, I think they could be better about it. That's the other side of the coin. Is like, you can have that philosophy and you could do that more politically. You have to help out the other teams in your area. You have to maintain these relationships and build these relationships so that you're not seen as stealing as much as you are just being seen as the next step or being the reward. It might help if FC Dallas wasn't playing these guys every week in the DA. You hate to say that about the DA, but maybe would be important to not have the MLS teams against these other teams, because then maybe you could be seen as a step up. And there are some clubs that have done good things. I think it's Atlanta that lists, when they list a player that they bring into their academy, they talk about the team they came from. They give some publicity to those organizations. They don't just say it's Atlanta United's this guy. It's Atlanta United's and whatever team he came from guy. They try and make a reciprocal relationship there. And up till now, we haven't really had solidarity payments, but maybe if Dallas has a guy that they've brought in from somebody else and they move them on, maybe they could share the wealth. Maybe they could try and do that. Maybe they could do it out of Mays. Maybe they could help develop facilities. Maybe they could help develop coaches. It's like there's ways to maintain relationships, and yet still, I think, have that philosophy of we should have all the best players in town should come through our academy. I think that's a fair belief to have.
It's the way it is all over the world, and you do have to cultivate those relationships. Whether it's, we'll take this player for training a couple of days a week. They'll still play for your DA team. We'll get them integrated so that they can maybe come with us for the last year, and then we get the homegrown claim on them, or we'll sign them to a USL deal or something, and we'll throw you in the UK the arrangements always. We'll pick up the cost of your kits for the next year for all your teams, or we'll play a token friendly and you keep all the gate receipts, or like Buzz alluded to, some facility help or anything like that.
I think I'm saying this correctly. Buzz, you mentioned Atlanta, and I think I understand the way Atlanta is doing this is that Atlanta is strictly a DA academy. They don't have a full-on pay-for-play youth structure. And the other thing that I think what I understood is they absorbed one of the larger clubs in the Atlanta area. Again, I'm going by a couple of conversations. I don't know if I'm totally being accurate about this, so please don't kill me if I'm not. But what I found interesting was the people that I've talked to have said, yeah, that Atlanta did this really, really well in terms of they're not constantly competing against everybody across all different age groups. And if they take if a player decides to go play for Atlanta to go join their academy, Atlanta makes a clear and obvious effort to help that club find a replacement player at the same time. And I thought, wow, that's really thoughtful. If that in fact is the case and to be true, somebody may send us a note or email me and tell me I'm wrong. But that's the kind of thing I think Dan's talking about that may separate the differences and why one club seems to be getting along in its community versus the other one that just doesn't seem to have everybody's support.
Yeah, I don't know that there probably isn't a universal answer to this, but there definitely could be some significant relationship building that's not happening. And there definitely is damaged relationships. I think Dallas could for sure do a better job about it. There have been some kids that have come through other academies that have said, no, I'm never going to play for FC Dallas. There have been a couple. So I understand that that's the other side of the coin too. Kids can get poisoned against the club by their, current team. So it's like it's a two-way street. There's a two-way relationship there. That those relationships should be built just not for fan base, but for the idea that you want your whole city and all of your clubs in your city buying into the first team being the thing, the MLS team being the thing. So it's like you want your whole city pulling in one direction, and right now it's not.
Well, you also want your whole city looking at it as there's a natural progression from no matter which youth team you're at, that you could one day play for the MLS team. Not the, if you play for Solo, and if, you're either Blaine Ferrier and you're good enough to go to try Europe, or you're really hoping for a D2 college scholarship.
Yeah, I certainly think of all of the reasons why this team struggles with attendance and media attention and all of the things in terms of popularity, that is one particular issue that just doesn't get talked about enough, which is the relationship problem between the club and what is arguably its most likely source of season ticket holders, which are people that really love the game and are involved with it all the time. And I just don't think people talk about that enough.
Well, that might be one way, as I said before, where a national MLS youth setup to not have your MLS teams be in the DA might actually help, because right now it's not only do you take my player, then you turn around and play them against me and beat me. It's like, well, if it was a step above the DA where, yeah, you're taking my player, but he's moving up to equivalent of moving up from AAA to the big leagues in the sense of a developmental level. So that maybe that's a reason why that in the long run, that might be the progression the whole thing goes. Plus, to be honest, like on any given week, the teams that FC Dallas is playing in the DA league are not providing particularly big challenges. It's not difficult games for FC Dallas because the talent level is just different. It's just not as good.
Yeah. There's actually saying about the season ticket holder base. When the FC Dallas women's team were looking to branch out of FC Dallas over the whole being treated like second-class citizens thing, one of the discussions was FC Dallas have offered X amount to run the team, or take FC Dallas's name off it, triple the attendance on a weekly basis, because even though a lot of the players had come from like Solar SC, the people who were really invested in Solar were like, yeah, we're not going to come and watch you. We're not giving any money to anything with FC Dallas in the name. So it definitely runs through to all the teams.
Yeah, I mean, we've told this story 100 times, and nobody believes me until they actually hear it directly from somebody associated with one of the clubs. But the story is true. There are club managers and coaches that compete against FC Dallas that actively tell their players, "I never want to see you in that stadium at an FC Dallas game." I mean, and as awful and as alarming as that sounds, it has happened before.
Yeah, and that's a shame. It's unfortunate. It's like, someone needs to get some people together and try and solve this problem, because it's definitely not helping anyone. The relationships are like this. It's not helping FC Dallas. It's not helping the clubs either.
Right? No, you're
absolutely
right.
The board.
But you and I have talked about this. We've written about it, and I've talked about it on the radio show. That starts with the club, and whether that's right or wrong, because it is a two-way street. This is all about the Hunts and the people that run the academy, and all of those people associated with that, taking a leadership position in making a very, very clear set of maneuvers to show that they're not everybody's landlord, that they want to be a leader in this community, and they want to help everybody also grow in their own way and their own clubs succeed. That would be the best way to do it, but it hasn't happened so far, and I don't know if it ever will, unfortunately.
There's so many ways to do it as well.
Yeah, no.
I mean, you can have a youth team out as ball kids and player escorts, while give the club one of the available suites on the weekend and say, just come, have some fun, enjoy. FC Dallas isn't the big bad wolf.
How about on some of those giant mural photographs that they have hanging all over the stadium, instead of it being just FC Dallas teams, how about you highlight and show off some of the other really good club teams in town, boys and girls?
Hold on, they haven't got to the point where they're advertising FC Dallas as much as the opposition yet. Let's not go too far.
So there's Zlatan jerseys we can put.
That's right.
Texans jerseys, yeah.
Well, just to kind of take it back to the beginning of this, I don't think Luchi meant it to sound the hyper-competitive way that I inferred it, but I did find it very interesting that he was willing to publicly talk about how he wanted to take the best players from other club teams for his own. And when you hear it that way and you start to think about the relationships and the environment and kind of the vibe going on between FC Dallas and all the clubs, you could see why somebody from another club would hear Luchi say that and get a little upset about it, or at least unhappy about it.
Yeah, that's the way the academy looks at things. Like when they need, just to throw a random concept out, when they need something like a left back, they don't go down to like the bottom ranks of their own club and say, "Hey, I need a left back, come on up." They might look at somebody else's number 10 and say, "Why don't you come to us and be a left back?" So it's like they look for the best talent available, and adapt it and mold it and take it from wherever they can find it. And it definitely has ended up with a scorched earth policy, and as a general principle, I don't mind it. I just think they just need to be better about how they do it.
At the same time, I think you have to also consider that of all the homegrowns, Jesus Ferreira is actually the only one that's come through FC Dallas on its own. Everyone else has come through a Solar or Texans or whoever else, really, FC Premier or someone like that.
Who was Paxton with before he joined the club?
Solar.
Okay, yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I think his dad also played for Solar too. Kevin back in the day.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, man, we covered a lot of ground and killed a lot of time, and it's all because Dan's rejoined the pod. I mean, goodness, things are just right with the world when Dan's back.
Wow, I almost believed that.
All right, I think the Dallas-Atlanta game is on ESPN at 4 p.m., is that right?
3 Central.
3 Central. Sorry, I was working Eastern time. So 3 Central.
Know because I'm looking right at it.
Excellent. I'm glad somebody's checking out the facts. I'm too lazy to do it. All right. Well, let's see how that goes. That'll be an interesting national broadcast in really awful jerseys. But what are we going to do about it? Thanks everybody for listening. We will talk to you again next week on Third Degree, the podcast.